Welcome to channel Qtomation. In today's session, we will see about one more exciting feature of Playwright, that is retries for flaky test. So before that, let's understand what exactly flaky test means. Whenever you write any test script and after you writing you execute that test script, sometimes even if all the code in that test script is perfectly fine. For example, you have located correct locators, you have written all the steps, assertions also correctly, and even on website also, those assertions are working totally fine. But still, due to some other conditions, like let's say network slowness, or let's say some intermittent issue on the website, or let's say page taking some extra time to load on certain conditions. And because of this situation, test case will fail. Even if everything is correct in the test case, but still that test case gets failed. And when you try again the same test case without making any change, it gets automatically passed. So that behavior is called the flakiness. The test case is perfectly fine, but sometimes when you run it, it works perfectly. But again if you run it, it will fail. But again if you run it, it will pass. So this inconsistent behavior of test case execution is called as flakiness of test case. Now that depends on multiple factors. But in Playwright, there is one very interesting feature of test case retries. So what this means is retries help the rerun failed test cases automatically. So when you execute the test case, it gets failed, you again have to execute it manually. But in Playwright, you don't have to execute it manually again and again. Playwright has provided the feature in which test cases rerun for failed test cases will automatically happen, and it will improve test stability, especially when dealing with flaky test. So that is called as a retry feature of Playwright. We can configure these retries in config.js file of Playwright also, which will be set as a global. And along with that, if you want to execute that retries mechanism for specific test case while runtime, that also we can do via command line terminal. So when this retries feature is enabled, failing test will be retried multiple times until they pass. And we can configure how many times we want to retry those test cases. We can configure that maximum number of retry in config file. As I said earlier, the test cases which will pass in the first run, that will be called as a pass test case. Test cases will get failed on first run, we can call them as failed test cases. So basically they will fail in all the retries also. So if there is some valid failure, for example if assertion is incorrect, or let's say test case is actually getting failed for all the retries, that means there is something wrong in that specific test case only. That will be marked as failed test case. And if the test case failed on the first run, but it will automatically retry in second run and it gets passed, then it will be called as a flaky test. Such test case is called as flaky test. So we will see one practical example, then we will understand in better manner. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. In Visual Studio Code, let's create a new file. I am naming it as flaky demo.spec.j. So we have created one test file. In this test file, I will add one test case from our last session in which we have opened sourcedemo.com and we have completed the checkout process for the product. I'm just copying this test case. I'm just pasting that test case here. And let's import our test and expect module. Let's save this file. And let me just quickly execute this file as well. Before that, let me add some timeout also. Otherwise, it will happen so fast. That's why I'm just adding some timeout here. And let's execute this test case. So what this test case will do is, it will open sourcedemo.com. After opening sourcedemo.com, after sourcedemo.com opening, what it will do? It will complete the checkout process. After completing the checkout process, it will verify the success message as well. So let me just execute this test case first so that you will understand what this test case is about. So what is the command to execute the test case? npx playwright test. What is the file name? Flaky underscore demo dot spec.js hyphen hyphen project equals to chromium hyphen hyphen headed, and currently I am not giving any retries option. So I am just executing without any retry option. So now let me execute this test case and let's see the test execution normally. Now it will start the test execution. So it is opening the browser, it will perform the login, it will add one product to cart, and it will verify this thank you success message. So that's the test case is about. And then it will perform the logout action. And now if you see, the test case is passed. That is perfectly fine test case which is working correctly. Now what I will do, I will just intentionally make this test case as failed. So what we can do, where we are verifying this success text to be equal to this specific text, I will add some random text in this so that assertion will fail and the test case will also fail. So now if I execute the same test case again, it will fail this test case. Now just imagine that because of some network condition also it can fail. But now after failure of this test case, it will not automatically run. Now if you see, it will start the test execution. It is starting the test execution now. And the assertion will fail now. So test case will also fail. So if you see, the test case got failed here. But after failure, this test case is not retried. It is not running automatically. Now here comes the retry feature of Playwright. Now what I want to do is, whenever the test case gets failed, I want to retry this test case 2 times. I want to still retry the failed test cases 2 times automatically. So for that what we have to do is, there are 2 options. We can either pass retry command from command line only. For example, when you execute this test case, let's say this is the test case execution. We can simply provide one option, that is, hyphen hyphen retries equal to 2. So when you provide this option hyphen hyphen retries equal to 2, what this means is, if this test case gets failed, it will be automatically retried 2 times. So once the test case gets failed, it will again execute the same test case again. If it is passed in first retry, then it will not go for second retry. But if still fails in the first retry, then again it will retry for second time. And in second retry, if it passed, then it will be marked as flaky test. But if it fails, it will again mark it as failed test case. So now let's execute this file. So now we can see how it will automatically get executed after failure. So now we are executing the test case. So it will start the test execution. It will fail first time. Then it will start the test case again. Automatically retry will happen for 2 times. If you see now, it is the first test execution. Test case will fail. If you see now in console, test case got failed. Now it will automatically retry. It will start the execution one more time. If you see, automatically it is showing you now retry 1 is happening. So it is again executing the same test case. So it will again start the test execution, but again it will fail. So now it will again try one more time. Now if you see in console also, it will first retry happen. Now it will go for second retry also. Because we have provided --retry equals to 2. So now in second retry also it will get failed. And once it fails in all the retries, it will obviously mark the test case as failed test case. Right? So it is called as a retry mechanism. Now what I will do, in the same example, what I will do, I will just remove this random text so that this test case will pass if you run normally. But what I will do is, while this test case is getting executed in the first retry, I will just press some random actions on script. For example, when the browser gets launched, I will just interfere that specific test execution, even though all the assertions are perfectly fine. Now if you see, if I simply execute this test case again, let me just execute this test case again, it will pass because we have removed the incorrect assertion. Now I am just executing the same test case again. I have provided retries option equal to 2, but that will come into the picture only if the test case gets failed. Now if I execute this test case again, it will pass in on the first attempt. It will not go for retry. So now if you see, the test case is getting executed and the test case is completely passed. If you see in console, test case is passed in the first attempt only. So it will not go for any retry. But now what I will do, this test case is perfectly fine. All the things are perfectly working correctly. But still when test case is getting executed in runtime, I will just interfere the test case. So what will happen? The test case will fail. But it will try again second retry. And in that first retry, what I will do, I will not interfere again. So it will automatically get passed. So let me just show you. So for example, now if I execute this test case again, but this time what I will do, I will intentionally interfere in the test execution, just to show you that sometimes network condition or some different factors can cause the test cases failure also. And in such scenarios, test retries becomes very helpful. So now test case is getting executed. So inside that, what I will do, I am just interfering the test cases. So let's say I'm just pressing some random things, right? So I have just pressed on this add to cart button, remove button, let's say cart button, and continue shopping button. So when the test case is getting executed, I am intentionally interfere so that now this test case will fail. Now because of my interfering, this test case will fail. It will not reach it up to the success point. Now if you see, test case got failed. Now it will retry. It will retry automatically because it failed. It will retry automatically. And in this retry, I am not going to interfere. So in this retry, the test case will get passed. But since first time it was failed and second time it got passed, it will mark the test as flaky test. Now if you see in the console, if you see the console, you can see the retry. In the first time when we executed the test cases, in the first time we interfered and test case got failed. But since we have applied this hyphen hyphen retry is equal to 2, it automatically started again for first retry, then it got automatically passed because we did not interfere in it. And since this test case is marked as passed, but in first attempt it got failed. So there is a difference in consistency. So that's why if you see, this test case is marked as flaky test. So such test cases are, Playwright itself says that these are the flaky test. This got passed, eventually it will pass, but because of our retry mechanism. So in such scenario, this retry feature becomes very useful. Now this is the first option by which we can configure the retry. So during runtime only, we can say that we want to retry this test case 2 times. For example, if you see here, during runtime, we can say retries equal to 2, or you can say 3 or 4, whatever you want. There is one more option in playwright config.js. So we can set retries in playwright.config.js file, and that will be considered as global setting. Global setting means it will be applicable to all the test cases execution. So where we can configure that? So let me just go to Visual Studio Code. Let me just clear out the console. In Visual Studio Code, if you go to playwright config.js file, in playwright config.js file, if you see, there is module.exports block. Inside this, I am just commenting this wala retries. This is for environment and continuous integration related thing. So I am just commenting this part. And inside this module.export, we can just add one parameter, that is retries. And here we can provide the value. So how many times you want to retry the test case if it gets failed? I am just keeping it as 2. So it will perform 2 times retry for the failed test case. Now once you provide this option in this playwright config.js, then you don't have to provide in command line when you execute the test case. If you provide in the command line, it will override this value. For example, now I am just executing the same test case again. So this is the same test case which I am executing, but this time since we have added the value of retries in playwright config.js file, we don't have to add here. So it will be automatically applied to all the test cases. So now we are just executing the test case normal manner. So I am just executing this test case. I am just executing the same test case again, but this time we have not provided any retries option in command, because we have already configured that option in our playwright config.js file. So it will start the test execution. It is starting the test execution now. Again, I will just interfere intentionally so that test case will get failed in the first attempt. So what I will do, once it will perform login, and before going to the next step, I am just interfering in between so that test script will not go to next step. So I'm just clicking on back again. So it will interfere this test case. So it will mark it as failed in the first attempt, and then it will go for first retry. So if you see, in first attempt it got failed, but now it will automatically start the test execution because we have configured retry option as 2 in config.js file. And now this time I will not interfere the test execution, so that this time the test case will pass. If you see now, successfully we can see the message of checkout. It will perform the logout, and this test case got passed. But since it was failed in first attempt and passed in second attempt without making any change, it will marked as flaky test. It is passed, but it is flaky. There is some inconsistent behavior in the test case. So this is about the retry feature. So 2 ways by which we can configure the test retry in Playwright. First one is we can configure globally inside playwright config.js file. If you see inside this playwright config.js file, we can configure this option here. Retries as 2, 3 or 4, whatever you want to give. Inside this module.exports, we can configure this retries option. And second option is via executing the test case. In the command line itself, we can say that --retries equal to 2. If you provide 3 here, and if you have also configured in this config.js file, it will override this value. So this will override, and if you provide 3 here, then it will retry for 3 times. So it will override the config setting. But you can use any option you want. However, there are some points which we should consider. Use retries only for flaky test. For example, network delays, any UI transitions related delay, etc. Playwright itself provides auto-wait features. For example, we can put some explicit conditions like page dot wait for selector, etc. So if there are some specific element which are taking some time to load, instead of using retry mechanism, we can handle those via page dot wait for selector also before relying on test retries. And we should always avoid excessive retries. We should find the actual root cause of the problem whenever it is possible. And playwright retry should be a backup option for that. So that's all about retry feature of playwright to handle the flaky test. In the coming session, we will see some more interesting topic of playwright. Thanks everyone.